Alright, let's get started.
This is this between us.
The number one podcast in the world.
This is
The JBU.Show featuring Austin,
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
Allen,
the American Sincerest.
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
Alright, how's it going, everybody? My name is Chris, and this is the JBU.Show. And joining me tonight is nobody so far. Allen might be popping in here at some point. He apparently had something come up, so hopefully we'll see him here in a little bit, but I'm not sure. Don't forget to check him out and the American Sincerest podcast on X, x.com/FirstAllen2 or at FirstAllen2. And of course, my other co-host who can't join us this weekend, Austin from the Miller Talk podcast. Make sure you check out his podcast as well at MillerTalk_pod on X or MillerTalk.substack.com. I got so many websites I got to try and keep straight. It's unreal. Anyway, we got a lot to talk about tonight. I'm going to do my best based on what Allen and I spoke about last night to not cuss for the first 2 minutes. I'm going to do my best. But I have a lot of complaining to do. A lot. I at some point today hit my limit for all of this, and I would argue that I am what Allen calls black-pilled. However, I looked up the definition of black-pilled before the show because I just went with what Allen said it was. Apparently, that's not even close. If you can't tell, I'm still sick. Hopefully, I'll make it through the show. It was really difficult last night. It's going to be even harder tonight since I am the only person here. I got to do all the talking, at least unless Allen shows up. I hope he does. But we're going to try and make it happen. I'm going to try and keep my cool for another 90 seconds or so. And then we're going to get into it. So, in an attempt to do that, in an attempt to keep my cool for the first 90 seconds, let's talk about this off the bat here. It is completely meaningless, but an interesting idea. So, France becomes the first country to force all supermarkets to give unsold food to the needy. Now, I have no idea if this is true. I don't really care if it is, but this is the type of idea that we hear all the time. Well, how come supermarkets don't just do stuff like this? And, you know, as much as I would like to believe, I just realized we got to fix that since I'm alone. There we go. As much as I would like to believe that it is a good idea, I don't like seeing food go to waste either. But here's the problem that you're going to have if you do something like this. People are going to stop buying food, and they're going to wait for the free food. And no, it's not going to be everybody all at once. A lot of people will just continue to buy their food like normal, sure. But ultimately, more and more people are going to stop buying their food and just wait and see what's in the free food. And then, you know, anything they don't get that they needed, they'll buy tomorrow, but they're just going to keep waiting for the free food every day to see what they can get out of that first. And as less and less buy food, more and more is thrown away, which is more and more the supermarket is now forced to give away for free. And then that trend just continues until eventually everybody's just waiting for the free food. Because even the people that want to buy their food eventually go, well, literally nobody except me is paying for food. I'm not going to keep doing this. Just wait and get free food with everybody else. And then what happens? You have no grocery store. Because obviously, they can't operate. Did you know that grocery stores, I don't know how it is in France, but I do know in America, evil capitalist nation of America, grocery stores have the smallest profit margin of virtually any business. One of the only smaller profit margins is oil. two of the most, like, two of the things that we demonize the most have the smallest profit margins. It's about 4% in a good grocery store. Some grocery stores operate on as little as 3% profit margin. Those greedy bastards. So my question is, what is an okay profit margin? If 3%, 4% is too much, what's acceptable? And to clarify with oil, because there are many steps in the oil process, any one of those steps makes about 3% profit margin. It's not that there is only 3% profit, but the gas station that sells the gas, they're only making 2 or 3%. The company that refines the oil, they make a little bit. The refining company makes the most, and it's still well under 10%. It's like 7 or 8%. But that is by far the most difficult part of the process, and that's where they separate the crude oil into literally hundreds of usable products, and therefore they have the highest profit margin because some of those products are worth more or have higher margins, some are worth less and have lower margins. Forgive me. I'm going to do my best. But then there's the company that pulls it out of the ground. They make on that lower, sub 5%. So maybe even grocery stores, if you average it all out, maybe even grocery stores are less than oil, but oil and grocery stores are two of the lowest by far. In comparison, the average, retail location, they operate between 30 and 50% profit margin, or the average manufacturer, I should say, between 30 and 50%. And even that can be difficult. Like, companies go bust all the time making 30%. Give me just 1 second here. I just got a text from my co-host, and apparently he was having a nice, relaxing Saturday, which, good for him. He'll be here in a little bit. All right. I apologize. So Alan will be with us here shortly. He said give him like 15 minutes and he'll be on. So if you were looking forward to Alan on the show today, then you'll get that here in a few minutes. I'm going to try and get my rant out of the way beforehand so that he does not have to just sit there and twiddle his thumbs while I'm ranting. Hang on here. I'm trying to get all this stuff lined up. Oh, I apologize, Twitch. I forgot. For whatever reason, everywhere connects automatically, but Twitch doesn't. You have to manually toggle Twitch on and off every single time. So I apologize. We're up on Twitch now. So if you are like the 3 people that watch on Twitch, which we appreciate you, don't get me wrong, I apologize. You should be running now. All right. Here's where I'm at today. I just like I don't want to be nice anymore. That's what it is. Like I'm tired of being nice. Women shouldn't be cops. They shouldn't be soldiers. The vast majority shouldn't vote. Men who don't have families, who don't have land, who don't have a job shouldn't vote. Especially the not having a job and not having kids. If you have neither of those 2 things as a man, you shouldn't vote. Criminals who try to flee from the police, I don't care if they get shot. I'm done pretending I care. I don't. If you're a criminal and you try to run from the police when they've caught you, I don't care if you get shot. At the same time, if you're a cop who kicks in somebody's door without a warrant, and we'll talk about the immigration thing in a minute because that's entirely different, and probable cause exists, or you're abusing your power in some way that is blatant, I don't care if you go to jail. In fact, I'd prefer you go to jail. Addicts. All these homeless addicts that are everywhere. Enough. Jail or treatment, your choice. Go to treatment, get out, get high again, jail. After you serve your time in jail, treatment. No more living on the street. Stealing TVs from Walmart, and we all just look the other way. Fuck that. Politicians. Get caught lying, fired. Do the opposite that you campaigned on, fired. Sell out this nation by going overseas and talking shit about this nation to other countries. I don't care if it's the other party. You talk crap about this nation while you're overseas, fired. You give away our secrets, you give away our tactics. If you're General Milley and you're calling China undermining the president, jail. We used to hang traitors, so I feel that's pretty generous. If you're 30 former intelligence agents that sign on to something you know is absolute bullshit because you don't like the president, jail. You call for the people to revolt against their government because you don't like the president, jail. At minimum, immediate impeachment. You fly a foreign flag in our country, I don't care if you get beaten up by an American. Not saying it's right, I don't care, and I'm not going to cry about it. You want to fly your fucking Mexican flag in downtown and talk about how many rights you have here in America? Fuck you. And if you get a beat down for it, don't expect me to do anything but acquit if I'm on that guy's jury. You should get a beat down, in my opinion, and you should be deported right after. This is the greatest fucking country on earth, and you are goddamn lucky to be here. And if you don't appreciate it, get the fuck out. And that goes for every leftist out there, too. You're welcome to come back to fucking sanity anytime. Happy to have you. But as long as you're going to sit there and agitate and try and undermine the system and try and create this fucking system that does not exist and violates every tenet of the American Constitution and our values and principles, fuck you. No more. I'm done pretending that you're every bit as American as a conservative. You're not. You're a piece of shit. And most of you are lazy pieces of shit. Most of you are not contributing members of society. In fact, you suck from society. Everything you can, you leech off of it. Believe me, I'm far from perfect. Made many mistakes. I've failed to do my part in, many ways. whether it's with my family, whether it's with my neighbors or my town, my community, right? Whatever it is. But there's a difference between somebody that tries and fails to live up to something and somebody that's not even trying. Or worse, is trying to destroy instead. And right now, these radical leftists out there are just trying to destroy. These radical judges are just trying to destroy. They shouldn't be impeached. They should go to jail. There's a difference between judges having a split opinion and radical activist judges that rule against the law and Constitution every single day of the week. And if you are what we would call a moderate Democrat out there, which the radical leftists call you a conservative, but if you're a moderate Democrat out there, now is the time to separate yourself from these assholes. I don't understand why you would want to stand with them. I understand why you might not be as far over as I am. I don't understand how you could stand with them for a second. If you believe in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the founding principles, yes, Christian principles of this nation, you don't have to be a Christian, but the societal principles that we built this nation on are in fact Christian, and you do have to recognize that, or at least accept them, then what the fuck are you doing with these radicals? Why are you sitting there nodding along, knowing you disagree? I don't get it. I truly don't get it. Oh. And if you say that we live on stolen land, if you call this stolen land, all of your assets should be immediately seized. And give them to whoever. I don't give a shit. Throw them in the ocean for all I care. Just take their fucking assets. Because there is absolutely nothing positive that comes out of that message. And I'm tired of people bitching about what our forefathers might have done instead of worrying about what they're doing right now. One day, and see, this is why feminism focused so hard on separating men and women and in convincing women they don't need kids. Because the moment I had a kid, I realized everything I'm doing today has nothing to do with myself. Yes, I need to make sure that I've got a retirement and that my family will be taken care of when I can no longer work. But someday, I'm going to have to pass this country on, as are the rest of you, to my kids. And right now, I'm primarily arguing with thousands of people who want to do absolutely moronic shit because once they die, there's nobody they're passing it on to. They don't give a shit. Why are we listening to them? Why are we giving them any attention at all? Impede an ICE officer, go to fucking jail. If you get beat up on the way, I don't give a shit. You know why I'm not worried about it? You know why I don't see it as police brutality that is, government overreach? Because it's not happening to anybody that isn't interfering with lawful action. These ICE agents are not superseding the law. They are doing what we asked them to, getting rid of the illegals. many of whom hate this fucking country, but are happy to take everything they can from it before they leave. Fuck you, that's over, get out. You can send me an email directly if you want to bitch at my bitching. JBU@USA.com. Matter of fact, when Alan gets here, I will pull that up because it's been a while since I've checked it. Of course, you can comment as well, and we will read your comment live on the show if I see it. I'm not the greatest at that, I won't lie. I don't know. I've said this before, like, I am naturally inclined to be a compassionate and caring person. Like, that is always, maybe it's because I was raised primarily by my mother. I knew my dad, and my dad, wasn't gone. My parents were together until I was 7 years old. They got divorced when I was 8. They separated, though, when I was 7. But after that point, until I had my son, I didn't see my dad all that much. I knew him. I saw him sometimes, some holidays, when my grandma died, things like that. We were supposed to see him every other weekend, and we did for a period of time after the divorce. But my mom then moved us 3 hours away from my dad. And God bless him, he did his best. But obviously, we got sick of doing that too. As kids, getting in the car for 6 hours every weekend. So, maybe it's a reality of being raised by my mother without much of a father influence. I don't know. But it really takes that away. That compassion really starts to fade away when it's abused over and over and over and over. And every time in the last at least 5 years, probably considerably more than that, but at least in the last 5 years, that somebody has called me a racist, somebody has called me an asshole, somebody has called me a misogynist, a sexist, all these other fill in the blank. It's never based on reality. 9 times out of 10, it's based on, a single statement by somebody that doesn't even know me. And don't worry, I don't take it to heart. I know they don't know who I am. I'm not worried about it. I'm much more concerned about the people, that I love and what they think of me. But at a certain point, that pattern adds up. And no longer is it just, oh, this person's misunderstanding who I am or what I'm about or whatever. And instead, it's this person is actively trying to harm people who think like me. And that probably should have been obvious when they took 2 shots at Trump, when they shot Charlie Kirk, when they shot a guy in the middle of the street in Portland for wearing a MAGA hat. Or at least what he assumed was a MAGA hat. As if there's not a million, MAGA type hats out there with all kinds of crap written on them. When they went after the Proud Boys in New York for defending themselves and actually defending innocent people. Antifa was beating up old ladies and they defended them. And some of those guys are still in jail in New York right now. Those Antifa members aren't. Why? Because they got their ass kicked. That's the only reason. They started the fight. everywhere the Proud Boys tried to go, Antifa showed up and started the fight. Yet it was only the Proud Boys that we ever punished. Enrique Torres was sentenced to 25 years in jail, or maybe it was 18 years, whatever the fuck it was, who cares, for January 6th when he wasn't even there. And the prosecution admitted that he had no foreknowledge of it. As far as Congress, I don't know that there's much that needs to be said besides fire all of them. Thomas Massey's about the only one I can put up with, and even him, I can't stand. I appreciate that he is a principled man. What I can't appreciate is that there is not a strategic bone in that man's body, that he doesn't understand that his vote in Congress every single time, that sticking to his principle sometimes means voting in favor of something that you normally wouldn't agree with. But we can't get to the principled thing unless we fix this thing first. And it's fine to vote against it on principle if it's not going to affect anything. But if it means handing it over to the wrong side, that should be above making a statement every single time. Not because you should be in lockstep with the GOP, but because the Democrats have openly shown themselves to be trying to undermine the entire way of life that we enjoy. That's two very different things. This is not disagreement about how much money we're spending. This is not disagreement about whether the federal government should be a little bigger or a little smaller. This is disagreement about whether or not Americans have the right to continue to be Americans. To continue to live in a free market, individualist, capitalist system based on Christian principles. Everything that the Democrats in Congress do is about undermining that system. And if you find yourself siding with somebody who is supposed to be representing Minnesotans, but claims to be representing the people of Somalia instead, then don't fucking talk to me about your principles and your voting based on your principles, Massey. And the reason I'm giving Massey so much shit is because I think there's a logical person there. I don't even waste my breath on the rest of them. Fire them all. Some of them should be in jail, sure. But again, we have to have proof to throw them in jail because there is a consequence to electing them. If we have proof, throw them in jail. At the very least, fire them fucking all. Quit voting for people because you recognize their name. You should be voting for somebody explicitly because you don't recognize their fucking name. Because everybody whose name we fucking recognize sucks. I don't know, man. I don't know. Let's get on to our first story. Let's see. What do we got here? Got all kinds of stuff. Sorry, I'm flipping through here to see. Oh, here you go. All hands on deck. San Francisco Elementary School. Elementary school students protest ICE. And by that I mean their radical feminist fucktard of a teacher took them out of school to go in the street and protest. These are what? Third graders? Fourth graders, maybe? 9, 10 years old? This teacher should be in jail. As should every other teacher that has either allowed it to happen or, God forbid, encouraged it or enabled it in any way. Jail. After Friday afternoon classes let out at Granton Elementary School, dozens of students poured through the doors with marker-drawn protest signs against the federal government's immigration policies. It's like a field trip, one boy remarked. Gee, I wonder why. Give me just a second here, sorry. Think these kids have any idea why their absolute criminal teacher is putting their lives in danger? Of course they don't. It's like a field trip, one boy remarked. As the procession walked 2 blocks from their Coal Valley school to a neighborhood dog park. They were joined by parents and younger siblings, as well as State Senator Scott Wiener, who held a handmade sign that said, "I only like ice in my lemonade." Yeah. Leading the way with a megaphone was 10-year-old Finley Borelli, who hatched the idea for a kids' protest last month. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure this was all this kid's idea. Borelli said he originally wanted to stage school walkout when he heard that's what the high schoolers around the country did. To protest the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by immigration officers. But since the 4th grader couldn't leave the building without his parents, he settled for an after-school protest instead. I wanted to start this because of what's happening in Minneapolis, Borelli told the crowd. I think it's horrific that people are getting treated this way. I wish Trump would stop doing this to people. I changed my mind. Scott Wiener should be in jail. The teachers should be in jail. And so should this kid's fucking parents. Borelli follows politics avidly. Yeah, I'm sure the 10-year-old follows politics avidly. During the you know what? Whoever wrote this article, fucking jail. During the protest, he pulled Wiener aside to ask his thoughts on Republican candidate Steve Hilton, choosing former state senator Gloria Romero as his running mate in California's gubernatorial election. He hears some of his news from his parents and reads the kids' magazine The Week Junior, although he worries that the publication is too neutral. Remember what my co-host Alan said when we were talking about the news article the other day about the guy? Matter of fact, I'm going to pull it back up. 40 years he had been witnessing how leftists do this. All the way back to the Iran-Contra scandal. Give me just a sec here. I'm trying to find. Anyway, and we heard about a specific family whose kid was killed, and they mourned him as a fallen comrade because they had raised their child to be a radical. And my co-host, Alan, went on to explain, sorry, I don't know why I had that on screen. went on to explain that, these that there are the most radical among these Marxist trained progressives. They literally raise their kids to be martyrs. Most of us have probably seen it. At least I have, living in a blue state. I know many kids that were raised that way. They were raised just like this kid is being described here. It should be child abuse. And look, do I want the state getting involved because the parent teaches their kid a bunch of propaganda? No. But I do want society to absolutely ostracize and exile these idiots. I want them to be thrown out of every restaurant they walk into, every school meeting that they attend. I don't want anybody to take them seriously. Because they are not serious people. They're radicals. They are willing to lie, cheat, and sacrifice their child to achieve their goals. I'm not willing to be friends with a person like that. I'm not willing to associate with a person like that, and I'm not willing to be friendly with a person like that. I feel for this kid, though. I definitely feel for the kid. Borelli follows politics at... Oh, sorry, too neutral, yeah. Okay, his mother, Jamie Alexis Fowler, said her son was crestfallen. What does that even mean? Anybody ever heard the term crestfallen before? Maybe I'm just an idiot, but I have literally never heard that term before. Sad because of recent disappointment. Okay. Okay. All right, so he's crestfallen. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to the correct story here. By the news of the killings in Minnesota. He organized a protest along two of his school friends, Lennon Young, and Samuel Brophy. The boys had a planning sleepover and a fundraising bake sale, even handing out flyers with QR codes to survey their neighbors on the times that worked best for them. At the park, the demonstrators passed around Girl Scout cookies and waved signs that said, "Melt ice," and "My parents fought for my future, now I will for theirs." How did your parents fight for your future? Because it seems to me that your future hasn't come yet, and so maybe your parents should still be fighting for your future and not some fucking immigrants that broke our law. Not legal immigrants, illegal immigrants. What are you fucking missing about that? Criminals. Oh, but they broke the law a long time ago, so we should just ignore it. No, fuck you. At the park, the demonstrators passed out Girl Scout cookies and waved signs that said, "Melt ice. My parents fought for my future, now I'll fight for theirs." They wrote letters to elected officials in Minnesota, as well as children in Minneapolis. Fowler said her neighbors would send them to friends and family who lived in the city. Okay. Here's a picture of this kid. Now, look, I wouldn't share this, except his parents shared it. So, yeah. Oh, look. Mom, 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 mom. Probably grandma. Not really sure, but has a camera. I mean, it's obviously a dude, but I don't know if that's grandpa or just somebody there taking pictures or what. You got one dude back here. This is the fucking senator that was dumb enough to take part in this. Mom. Can't see. You see a fucking pattern? Look, women are easily manipulated, especially lonely, angry, single ones. You don't have to like me saying it, but I think it's pretty fucking obvious. They also routinely destroy their children. They use them in every wrong way possible. They rely on them for emotional support, or they give them no emotional support whatsoever. It's always an extreme, one way or another. Each of these kids has a response and an emotion and a sense of frustration about what's happening, Fowler said. No, about what their parents told them is happening. Big difference. So for them to be able to put this into motion, I think that's really meaningful. Well, you're a fucking idiot. Borelli's parents helped him extend the invitation to local politicians, including Weiner. The senator was a late substitute for a Board of Supervisors President Raphael Mandelman, who was delayed by Super Bowl traffic. We are all, yeah, I bet he was. We are all in an all-hands-on-deck situation, Weiner told the Chronicle. You're a fucking idiot, too. It's going to be a long term for our country. It's going to be a long-term fight for our country. So we need the next generation of leaders and activists to learn early, i.e., we need to program them now. If my kid came to me and said I wanted to protest all these illegal immigrants whose kids don't speak English in my class, make it hard for me to learn, make my classroom 40 kids to one teacher instead of 20, let alone, the fact that they're getting free school lunches via my tax dollars and yours, free school breakfasts, actually, in this state as well. We are spending $22,000 a year per child in Washington state, half of which are illegals. If my kid came to me and said he wanted to protest that, I would tell him no. Even though I agree with him. Because, of course, my kid thinks very similar to me. Because I'm his fucking dad. And he doesn't know any better. He's 10 years old. Just barely older than these kids. Or probably about the same age. I mean, they're roughly the same age, right? These are 3rd, 4th graders. That's 8 to 10 years old. My son is 10 years old. He doesn't know shit. Except for what me and his mother tell him, as far as the outside world. And he doesn't need to. Not yet. I'm not a big fan of keeping things from kids, right? I don't hide the ugliness of the world from my kid. Because the world is an ugly place. Parents literally used to tell their kids monster stories, like the opposite of fairy tales. Terrible stories where humans were slaughtered and murdered because reality was awful and gruesome. And it set the proper expectation, essentially. Back then, 1 in 3 kids didn't make it to the age of 5 years old. You want to know how long ago that was? Less than 100 years ago. Your grandparents' generation. 1 in 3 kids didn't make it to 5 years old. The fact that we live in such a comfortable fucking world right now is exclusively because of the amazing fucking country we built. It is still a gruesome place in most of the world. The peace that the rest of the world enjoys, almost entirely because of the United States of America. Yes, even including the places that we have fucked with when we shouldn't have. But anyway, if my son came to me and asked me to do that, I would tell him no. He does not have the life experience necessary to understand the ramifications of those actions. Aside from that, protests are fucking useless. So if he wants to make a difference, that's not how you do it. When was the last time a protest fucking changed anything? You could probably say the civil rights movement, although we were already moving that direction anyway. Republicans have been fighting for it since the end of the war. In the meantime, while American parents are teaching their kids to hate while calling it love, right? Because what those parents are teaching their kid is to love people that hate them and to hate people that protect them. I'm not in favor of what ICE is doing because it's the government and I just implicitly trust the government. I implicitly don't trust the government. I'm not just going along with it because I like Trump or voted for Trump. I don't particularly like Trump all that much, honestly. I still would vote for him today, but I don't like him all that much. But that's not why I'm defending what ICE is doing. It's not why I defend what cops do, generally speaking. I defend it because it's what we ask them to do. And as long as they are doing what we ask them to do, what we demand that they do, for ICE, that's deport illegals. For cops, that's arrest criminals and leave regular working people alone. As long as that's what they're doing, I'm going to support it. And I'm going to give them as much leeway as humanly possible to do that job. And no, I don't have a problem that ICE is arresting U.S. citizens. Yes, I would have a problem if they were actually just randomly arresting U.S. citizens. They're not. They're arresting U.S. citizens that attack them or impede them. Not a problem. The vast majority are never charged anyway. We watched a video the other night of a man that assaults an ICE agent, and the agent just lets him go. Same thing with Preddy, right? Assaults an agent by spitting on him, then destroys federal property by kicking out the taillight of an ICE vehicle. They go to arrest him and ultimately decide to let him go. They shouldn't have. They should have fucking arrested him. Maybe he would have thought twice before doing the same thing again, which got him shot. I'm not mad he got shot. It's unfortunate. I'm not mad. In the meantime, China is sending their loyalists to the United States to have children here. They're born here, are U.S. citizens, and then those loyalists take those children back to China to be raised by the CCP. And one day, those kids will be 18. They'll be legally allowed to vote in the United States. Estimates are, by the CCP, that they get 100,000 people a year to do this. How many years before they can change an election? 1. That means in 18 years, less than that, because this started several years ago. So like 14 years, or I don't remember exactly how many years ago it started, but it was like 4 or 5 years ago. So in, 12, 13 years, we will have CCP members, party members, indoctrinated by the CCP, voting in U.S. elections. What the fuck is wrong with us? Why are we listening to leftists at all? Are you fucking serious? We raise our kids to protest the law enforcement officers that are literally keeping them safe. Meanwhile, the Chinese raise their kids to learn how to handle firearms, to learn how to follow orders, to be child prodigies in math, in science, in whatever it is that child is good at. While the rest of the world strives for excellence, we strive to hinder ourselves because of some fucking made-up concept of guilt because we're fucking good at shit. This country has everything it has, not because of some sort of made-up concept of privilege. Because we fucking worked for it. We built it. When it didn't exist. It literally did not exist, and we created it out of thin air. And fuck anybody that says we should feel guilty about that, or that we should hold ourselves back because of that. You think China's holding themselves back for any reason? You think India is? Somalia? Iran? Pakistan? You think any of these places are holding themselves back? You think any of these places are ever constantly apologizing to their people over prospering? Unfucking real. Absolutely unreal. 100 years, progressives have been trying to fundamentally transform the United States. They say it in the open now. Yes, they also say out of the other side of their mouths how much they love the country. But then, when they think people aren't looking, although really not all that secretly anymore, they also say that they hate everything about this fucking nation, every principle that this nation is built on. And we just ignore it. We just pretend that, oh, they just have a difference in opinion. Oh, they just, they want a little bigger government. No, they don't. They want total control. They want collectivism, not individualism. They want fascism, the literal definition, the economic definition, not capitalism or a free market system. And they want hedonism rather than moral principle, Christian principle. I had a hang on, let me find this real quick so I can get the story correct. Video is this? Oh, this one. Okay. I had a guy today, I'm assuming a black American, but it's Twitter, so who knows. Call me a racist, which happens all the time. That's fine. Because I said I understood why the police shot a man. This particular man was black. Ironically, at the same time, I was arguing on a different thread about a different police shooting of a white kid in an even more questionable circumstance that I still defended the cop in. But I digress. And you know, I realized in that moment, and I almost said this, but then it just felt too mean, so I didn't. But how pathetic must you be to believe that 7% of the world's population has perpetually held you down for so long? And there's nothing you can do. Despite the endless number of black Americans that succeed in this country every day of the week because they put in the work. Despite the neurosurgeons, the lawyers, the doctors, politicians, the pro athletes, the singers, the songwriters, on and on and on down the list. It's pathetic. I'm not interested in aligning with anybody, in helping anybody that divides anything by race. If you're an American, that's all that matters to me. It's all that's ever mattered to me. But if you see yourself as something else first, I don't care. I have never once considered myself a white American. Or a white anything, for that matter. But I guess we're just so vastly superior to the rest of the races in the world that even though there's only 7% of us on the planet, we control everything through nothing but our skin color alone. Maybe it's fucking effort. Maybe it's the values and the principles that we share, that we hold dear, that we built this nation on, that anyone can take part in. And many have, and many succeed doing so, of all races. I'm just tired of excuses. I think that's really what it comes down to. Oh, the cops. Oh, the white man. Oh, the economy. Oh, the what? I don't give a fuck. It all sucks. It always has. Always. What are you going to do about it? If you don't see your job as a parent, by the way, as raising your child to be tough enough to put up with the world, you're screwing up. Your job is not to hide the world's evils from them as long as possible. Your job is to make them okay with it, to make them tough enough to be able to handle it. And, of course, to make sure they know that they have you to rely on. And that their family is always there, even when no one else is. All of that is still true. But the part that we've seemed to forgot is that our job is not to protect them from everything, it's to build them up for it. It's not to hide them from it. It's to prepare them for it. It's to make them self-reliant, not reliant on you or anybody else. DHS unloads on activist judges granting illegal immigrants freedom in habeas cases. The Department of Homeland Security unloaded on activist judges it accused of playing politics with the legal system and said federal authorities will continue to arrest illegal immigrants across Minnesota despite a growing trend across the state of judges releasing those who have filed habeas cases. It should come as no surprise that more habeas petitions are being filed by illegal aliens, especially after many activist judges have attempted to thwart President Trump from fulfilling the American people's mandate for mass deportations, said DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin. As of this week, federal law enforcement officers have arrested more than 4,000 illegal immigrants during Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. It's nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. However, those in detention are filing habeas cases outside of immigration court. Why are we allowing that? They're not Americans. They have no right to petition an American court, period. Just because liberals choose to interpret the Constitution incorrectly, even though we have the words of the people that wrote it, that clarified exactly what they meant by the 14th Amendment, why are we fucking listening? An illegal immigrant has no rights to petition the American government. They have no protections under our system. And I'm not saying that they should be abused, but they should damn well not be able to abuse our system to break our laws. Why are we holding them at all? Deport them. Arrested, gone. Next day. Same day, ideally. I don't understand why we're holding them at all. Although immigration courts are intended to decide immigration cases, the habeas cases, a habeas corpus case is a, let me get this right so I don't screw it up because it is a legal thing. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that ensures a person cannot be held in detention without lawful recourse. So it's because they're being held without bail, because they're not U.S. citizens, they're awaiting deportation, and the only reason they're being held is because they've filed petitions in the court. I don't know why we even allow it. They can file a petition in the court, fine. Deport them in the meantime. They can do paperwork from Mexico or from El Salvador or Guatemala or where the fuck ever. Although immigration courts are intended to decide immigration cases, the habeas cases are being filed outside in regular courts, where more sympathetic judges are ruling that the federal government cannot detain people indefinitely. No, they cannot detain American citizens indefinitely. That is the only rule we put on our government. And they're not detaining people indefinitely by choice. They're detaining them until their court cases are heard because that's what the illegal immigrant asked for. This is what I mean. They file petitions in order to stay in a deportation center in the United States instead of being deported immediately. They file petitions in the immigration court. That might take 2 years to resolve. It might take 5. And then now what they are doing is filing petitions outside of immigration court, which they have zero right to do, and saying you can't detain us indefinitely, even though they asked to stay detained. And for whatever fucking reason, there are judges that are granting this to them. Those judges should go to jail. As the Washington Examiner reported this week, immigration advocacy groups have so far been able to make the Trump administration appear as if it is losing the legal battle over its mandatory detention policies by following rinse and repeat patterns in the district court. In Minnesota, groups such as the American Immigration Council or American Immigration Lawyers Association, again, why do we even allow these places to exist? Why would we ever allow an American NGO to get a tax-free status in the United States when their job is to assist people entering the country illegally? Their job is to assist people in becoming criminals. And in violating U.S. sovereignty. Their job is to assist people in invading. Yet they have tax-exempt status. Anyway, these NGOs file a habeas petition to a federal judge, who more often than not grants temporary release to the detained immigrant enforcement target. More than 300 district judges in Minnesota and elsewhere have so far rejected the government's mandatory detention policies, ordering detainees released or granted bond hearings. That has fueled a surge of copycat filings nationwide. All the while, appeals courts have yet to address whether the administration's interpretation of the INA comports with the law. It's not an interpretation. A law is not up for interpretation. It is written in black and white. In Minnesota, the habeas approach seems to be working for plaintiffs. The U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen, an appointee of President Donald Trump, disclosed in a declaration submitted to an appeals court that 427 immigration-related habeas cases were filed in the District of Minnesota in January. The pace is expected to continue in February despite plans by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and federal agencies to draw down 700 of the roughly 3,000 officers present in the state. McLaughlin said the Trump administration is more than prepared to handle the legal caseload necessary to carry out President Donald Trump's deportation agenda. Good. President Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem are now enforcing the law and arresting illegal aliens who have no right to be in the country. If an immigration judge finds an illegal alien has no right to be in this country, we are going to remove them, period. Rosen, a Justice Department attorney, was far less optimistic. To respond to this wave of habeas petitions, this office has been forced to shift its already limited resources from other pressing and important priorities, Rosen wrote in the declaration. The MNUSAO has canceled all affirmative civil enforcement work and any other affirmative priorities and is operating in a reactive mode. So what she's saying is American citizens are getting fucked because these judges are granting illegal aliens a right that they don't have. Not to mention the fact that a judge has no right to create rights, let alone law, out of thin air. The law is very clear. How do I know the law is very clear? Oh, because the appeals court has finally weighed in and affirmed the Trump interpretation. Allen, anytime now. I'm losing my voice quicker and quicker. President Donald Trump's, this one comes from the AP, by the way. President Donald Trump's administration can continue to detain immigrants without bond, making a major legal victory for the federal immigration agenda and countering a slew of recent lower court decisions across the country that argued the practice is illegal. No, it's not. A panel of judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Friday evening that the Department of Homeland Security's decision to deny bond hearings to immigrants arrested across the country is consistent with the Constitution and the federal immigration law. And I can prove it's consistent with the Constitution really easy. Just a second. 111, that's the Bill of Rights. Where's the Constitution? 36. We, the people of the United States, not of Mexico, not of Guatemala, or El Salvador, or Colombia, or Brazil, or the UK, or Africa, or Australia, or New Zealand, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, that means children, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Not for every fucking person in the world. Leftists pretending they don't understand is not an excuse. A panel of judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Friday evening that the Department of Homeland Security's decision to deny bond hearings to immigrants arrested across the country is consistent with the Constitution and federal immigration law. Specifically, Judge Edith H. Jones wrote in the 2-1 majority opinion that the government correctly interpreted the Immigration and Nationality Act, asserting that the unadmitted aliens apprehended anywhere in the United States are ineligible for release on bond, regardless of how long they have resided inside of the United States. Under past administrations, most non-citizens, illegals, with no criminal record who were arrested away from the border had an opportunity to request a bond hearing while their cases would wander through the immigration court. Historically, bond was often granted to those without criminal convictions who were not flight risks, and mandatory detention was limited to recent border crossers. Last I checked, the fact that they're not flight risks is the problem. That prior administrations decided to use less than their full enforcement authority under the law does not mean they lacked the authority to do more, Jones wrote. I.e., because they didn't follow the law doesn't make it wrong for the Trump administration to follow the law that was passed by Congress. The plaintiffs in the two separate cases filed last year against the Trump administration were both Mexican nationals who had both lived in the United States for over 10 years and weren't flight risks, their attorneys argued. Neither man had a criminal record, and both were jailed for months last year before the lower Texas court granted them bond in October. The Trump White House reversed that policy in favor of mandatory detention in July, reversing almost 30 years of precedent under both Democrat and Republican administrations. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know about 30 years, but whatever. Friday's ruling also bucks a November district court decision in California. Doesn't fucking matter what a district court in California believed. It does not matter. We have appeals courts and federal courts to overrule them for a reason. Sorry. Normally I wouldn't do that on camera, but there's nobody here to distract in the meantime, so you get what you get. The elected, hold on here, which granted detained immigrants with no criminal history the opportunity to request a bond hearing and had implications for non-citizens held in detention nationwide. This goes to the last story we were just reading and why they all flooded the court with new cases. Friday's ruling also bucks, I just read that. Circuit Judge Dana M. Douglas wrote the lone dissent in Friday's decision. The elected Congress members who passed the Immigration and Nationality Act would be surprised to learn it had also required the detention without bond of 2 million people. No, they wouldn't. Adding that many people of the detained are the spouses, mothers, fathers, grandparents of American citizens. Entirely irrelevant. She went on to argue that the federal government was overriding the lawmaking process with DHS' new immigration detention policy that denies detained immigrants bond, because I would reject the government's invitation to rubber stamp its proposed legislation by executive fiat. I dissent. She literally read in the law what it said. The only people that were changing the law by fiat were the administrations that were not enforcing it. Douglas' opinion echoed widespread tensions between the Trump administration and federal judges around the country who have increasingly accused the administration of flouting court orders. Yet court orders that they're under no obligation to follow. Those courts had no business issuing those orders because they have no jurisdiction to, and they knew that. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi celebrated the decision as a significant blow against activist judges who have been undermining our efforts to make America safe again at every turn. Yeah, well, Pam Bondi should still be fired. We will continue vindicating President Trump's law and order agenda in classrooms across the country, Bondi wrote on X. Yeah, again, I still want Bondi fired. You notice that the AP, I'll put it up on screen. Hold on. Did I speak too soon? No. So, they hyperlinked the decision from California. They hyperlinked a slew of recent decisions from lower courts across the country. They did not hyperlink the decision from the appeals court. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick because I'd like to see what else the judges had to say, if there was anything useful in it. Let's see. Who is the judges? Judge Edith H. Jones. Recent decision. Ballotpedia, Edith Jones. Jones was nominated position, yada yada. No, where's... Alright, how about 5th Circuit ruling on immigrants. February 7th, that's today. In a ruling just handed down, there it is. Is it hyperlinked? It is. Okay, we got it. 5th Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't want the background, I just want the decision. Factual and procedural background. All right, the petitioners concede that they are applicants for admission with the meaning of law 1 subsection of a law 122A1. I'm not going to look into what that is specifically. At the time ICE apprehended them, they were present in the United States and had not been admitted. Presence without admission deems the petitioners to be applicants for admission. Nor do the petitioners dispute that the law applies to them. It would require their detention without eligibility for bond. The statute unambiguously, I'm going to put this up on screen, by the way, and I'm so like right here where it says, nor do the petitioners dispute that that the law applies to them. I'm saying the law, they're citing the law specifically here, as you can see. I'm trying to translate this into plain English as I read it, because obviously there's a lot of legalese in these. I've read a lot of court decisions, so just understand that I am adding some words just to make it easier to understand for you guys listening. Anyway, the statute unambiguously provides for mandatory detention. Unambiguously. Providing that aliens shall be detained. That's what the law says. Aliens shall be detained. That is unambiguous as it gets. Yet, do you remember what the other judge said in dissent? We'll get to that in a minute. let's see, provides for mandatory detention and mandate detention of aliens throughout the completion of applicable proceedings and not just until the moment those proceedings begin. And neither the law nor another law says anything whatsoever about bond hearings. Despite these concessions, the petitioners insist that they fall outside of the scope. They argue that the law applies only to aliens who are both applicants for admission and seeking admission. Hard to see what's different about that. Pointing to a definition of admission in 8 USC subsection 1101A13A. The petitioners contend that admission means the lawful entry of an alien into the United States after inspection and authorization by an immigration officer. According to the petitioners, then, seeking admission refers only to those aliens who are actively pursuing lawful entry and submitting themselves to an inspection by an immigration officer. What a ridiculous argument. When ICE apprehended the petitioners, neither was actively engaged in the admissions process. Thus, they argue, they were not seeking admission, and it does not apply to them. So basically what they're saying is, because we came in illegally and we didn't go through a port of entry, we're not seeking admission. We just want to be here. The fact that 1 out of the 3 judges bought this argument, jail. Straight to jail. The text and context of subsection 1225, because remember, by the way, when I say straight to jail, keep in mind, this is not a difference of opinion. It very unambiguously said, shall be detained, as the judge just said. The text and context of subsection 1225 of the law contradict the petitioner's reading of the statute. The proper reading begins with the ordinary meaning of the language in subsection 1225 B2A. There is no material disjunction by the terms of the statute or the English language between the concept of applying for something and seeking something. When a person applies for something, they are necessarily seeking it. Compare Webster's New World College Dictionary, 69th edition. They're telling you to compare the definitions. Let's see. Just as an applicant to a college seeks admission, an applicant for admission to the United States is seeking admission to the same, regardless whether the person actively engages in further affirmative action to gain admission. The everyday meaning of the statute's terms confirms that being an applicant for admission is not a condition independent from seeking admission. The petitioners first respond that seeking is in the present tense, and thus it requires some form of present affirmative action. Once again, the ordinary meaning of the term suggests otherwise. Return to the example of the college applicant. It would make no sense to say that as soon as the applicant clicks submit on her application, she is no longer seeking admission merely because she does not take any further affirmative steps to gain admittance. Instead, she would ordinarily be understood to be seeking admission as long as her application is pending. The same is true here. The petitioners are deemed by statute to be applicants for admission pending the resolution of removal proceedings. While they remain applicants, they are presently seeking admission. That seeking admission is equivalent to being an applicant for admission by operation of a law that was confirmed by the BIA over a decade ago in matter of Lumis Losa. They're referring to another court case. Next, the petitioners contend that interpreting applicant for admission to necessarily entail seeking admission would render seeking admission redundant in the text. To the extent that the government's interpretation creates any redundancy between these terms, that redundancy does not give this court a license to rewrite another portion of the statute to contrary to its text. The Supreme Court has observed that redundancies are common in statutory drafting, sometimes in congressional effort to be doubly sure, sometimes because congressional inadvertence or lack of foresight, or sometimes simply because of the shortcomings of human communication. Moreover, There is no canon of interpretation that forbids interpreting different words used in different parts of the same statute to mean roughly the same thing. That seems doubly true where the ordinary meaning of the terms involved overlap. Because being an applicant ordinarily entails seeking something, it seems natural to use the words interchangeably. Undeterred, the petitioners argued that applicant for admission is a term of art. Boy, their lawyers really earned their dime on this one. So it cannot be understood according to its ordinary meaning, but the remaining provisions of subsection 1225 confirm the applicants for admission are indeed necessarily seeking admission. Most notably, section A3 of that subsection specifies that all aliens, including alien crewmen who are applicants for admission or otherwise seeking admission or readmission to or transit through the United States, shall be inspected by immigration officers. By the way, if you're wondering why it says alien crewmen, they're talking about on a ship. Let's see. As the government points out, when an English speaker uses the phrase such as to bike, to jog, or otherwise exercise, the first two items constitute one item out of the overall set. Accordingly, an application for admission is necessarily someone who is seeking admission. Section 1225A5 reinforces the same relationship between applicants for admission and seeking admission. It provides that an applicant for admission may be required to state under oath any information sought by an immigration officer regarding the purposes and intentions of the applicant in seeking admission to the United States. That language strongly suggests that those who are applicants for admission are seeking admission. The petitioners offer no pervasive response to these provisions. With respect to subsection A3, they suggest that or otherwise means that aliens seeking admission are proceeding in a different way or manner than applicants for admission. But if that were true, Congress would simply have said applicants for admission or those seeking admission. Adhering to the government's reading would render the otherwise surplusage, because or otherwise does not mean the same thing as or. The other alternative offered by petitioners makes no more sense than the first one. They suggest that or otherwise language merely clarifies which applicants for admission are required to be inspected under this law. Namely, those who, like other non-citizens described in the or otherwise clause, are requesting permission to enter, re-enter, or transit through the country. This interpretation ignores the beginning of the subsection, which mandates inspection for all applicants for admission. Given that language, the or otherwise language cannot possibly be clarifying which subset of applicants for admission applies to, because it unambiguously applies to all of them. Furthermore, if the petitioners are right that only those who are actively seeking admission are subject to the inspection requirement, then their reading would eliminate the inspection requirement for aliens entering the country unlawfully. Doing so would return the pre-IIRIRA regime in which illegal entrants receive favorable treatment compared to aliens lawfully undergoing admission procedures. To make matters worse for the petitioners, if Congress had intended an alien seeking admission to effectively mean arriving alien, it would have simply said arriving alien. Congress did not hesitate to use the arriving alien language elsewhere in the same law. Despite Congress' decision to use seeking admission in the same breath as applicant for admission not once but 3 times, the petitioners urged the court to interpret seeking admission in the same way as the language Congress elected not to use in any of the other subsections of the law. That is not the only textual oddity that results from the petitioners' reading. The petitioners would have the court believe that Congress defined applicant for admission broadly in subsection A1 of the law to include all aliens present in the United States who have not been admitted, but then every time it subsequently used the phrase, it narrowed it to only apply to those actively seeking admission. Under that interpretation, Congress could simply have defined applicants for admission as those arriving in the United States, omitting from the definition any reference to aliens present in the United States who have not been admitted. Okay. They're getting awful repetitive at this point, and that's not the judge's fault. That's because the way the petitioners argued this, they were trying to use a technicality that was so ridiculous of a technicality. It required this much to clarify every point so that there was no room for wiggle by these lower court judges that are choosing to pretend the law doesn't say what it says. It very clearly does. As the judge said, there's no ambiguity whatsoever. Second, the Jennings language does not refute the government's interpretation. It is true that subsection 1226 applies to aliens in the United States. That it does so, however, does not preclude the former subsection from also applying to such aliens. As the government acknowledges, the two provisions overlap. Accordingly, for petitioners to find support in Jennings, they must overread the Supreme Court's language. In particular, they seem to infer that when the Supreme Court specified that subsection 1226 applies to aliens inside the states, it implied that 1225 does not apply to such aliens. But this is the exact sort of language parsing inquiry that the Supreme Court has cautioned lower courts against. See National Pork Producers Council v. Ross. The language of an opinion is not always to be parsed like the language of a statute. Moreover, even if the court should conduct a granular analysis of language in Jennings, a previous Supreme Court decision they were trying to rely on also, doing so supports the government's interpretation. In claiming that the Supreme Court pronouncement that subsection 1225B applies to aliens who are seeking admission supports their interpretation, the petitioners inexplicably assume that the Supreme Court understood seeking admission in the same way that petitioners do. It demonstrably did not. Elsewhere in Jennings, the Supreme Court explained that 1225B applies to aliens seeking entry in the United States, applicants for admission in the language of the statute. That language supports the government's contention that applicants for admission are, according to the statute, seeking entry or seeking admission. And it suggests that when the Supreme Court described 1225 as applying to aliens seeking admission, it understood that to mean aliens who, like the petitioners here, are present in the United States without admission. So basically, what they were saying was what the petitioners, meaning the illegal aliens that were suing, were trying to say was, we're already in the U.S. illegally, and therefore these laws against us being in the U.S. illegally don't apply to us, based on this technical interpretation of the law that is absolute bullshit. All right. Let's see what the dissent has to say, because I can't imagine it's anything reasonable based on how unambiguous that decision was. Conclusion: for the foregoing reasons, the order of the two district courts are reversed and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. Okay. Imagine that. It's a female judge that dissents. Just is. The Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, that is the IIRIRA that I referred to earlier, was passed in part out of desire to equalize the treatment of non-citizens presenting at ports of entry for inspection and those apprehended in the interior after effecting an unlawful entry. Why would we want to equalize those two things? Why would we treat somebody that is lawfully going to a port of entry, even if they don't have a right to enter, the same as somebody who openly flouts the law and came in illegally? Why would we treat those two the same? We shouldn't. It would be ridiculous to do so. It would be like saying, it doesn't matter that you broke the law. We're going to treat you the same as somebody who didn't. Nonetheless, let's see. It pursued this aim in several ways, most prominently by... So already the judge is making an assumption about the law, right? They're assuming that that was what the law's aim was to do. Now, I didn't read the law, so I don't know if that's a correct assumption or not, but it's an assumption nonetheless. It pursued this aim in several ways, most prominently by deeming both classes of non-citizens applicants for admission, subject to the same removal procedures, and excluding non-citizens detained based on certain criminal offenses from eligibility for bond. Okay, so let me reread that. It pursued this aim in several ways. Most prominently, it deemed both classes of non-citizens applicants for admission, subject to the same removal procedures, okay, and excluded non-citizens detained based on certain criminal offenses from eligibility for bond. So basically what this judge is saying is that only people who are excluded for certain criminal offenses would not have eligibility for bond. We'll see about that. Notice they didn't cite the law anywhere there to back up that argument. The Congress that passed IIRIRA would be surprised to learn that it also required the detention without bond of 2 million people. For almost 30 years, there were no sign anyone thought it had done so, and nothing in the congressional record of the history of the statute's enforcement suggests that it did. Nonetheless, the government today asserts the authority... the law said it, plain as day. Nonetheless, the government today asserts the authority and mandate to detain millions of non-citizens in the interior, some of them present here for decades on the same terms as if they were apprehended at the border. So, no matter that you just said that the point of the law was to equalize those outcomes. No matter that this newly discovered mandate arrives without historical precedent, and in the teeth of one of the core distinctions of immigration law, the overwhelming majority of this court in this circuit and elsewhere have recognized that the government's position is totally unsupported. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to read this subparagraph and just see if there's anything relevant. Nope, just complaining about the fact they had to expedite the case. Boo-hoo, do your job. Okay. The overwhelming majority of courts in this circuit and elsewhere have recognized that the government's position is totally unsupported. That is simply not true. The overwhelming majority of district courts that are below that court have. And I still don't know that it's an overwhelming majority. An overwhelming majority that have ruled on it, sure. But that's different than an overwhelming majority. Anyway. Undeterred, the majority in government distort the statutory text. They shared the text with us. Sounded very unambiguous to me. Abstract it from its context and history. Entirely irrelevant. This is what we hear from activist judges all the time. Context and history. Why? Because it allows you to imagine anything you want to in it. Well, it wasn't enforced before, so that means it wasn't written. But it was written. So, change the law if you don't like it. ignore the Supreme Court's clearly stated understanding of the statutory scheme and wave away the agency's previous failure to detain millions of non-citizens as if it were a rounding error. What a ridiculous statement. And for what? First of all, the court is not supposed to consider what the outcome is for the government. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. It matters whether the decision is right or wrong. It matters whether the law says it or it doesn't. And if it does say it, does it violate the Constitution or does it not? Those are the only two things that a court is meant to interpret. And for what? The majority stakes the largest detention initiative in American history on the possibility that seeking admission is like being an applicant for admission. In a statute that has never been applied in this way based on little more than an apparent conviction that Congress must have wanted these non-citizens detained. Some of them, the spouses, mothers, fathers, and grandparents of the American citizens, straining at a gnat, the majority swallows a camel. I dissent. Let's look up this law and see what it says for ourselves, shall we? Since apparently we're not being joined by Alan today. Let's see. (8) USC subsection, this is according to AI real quick. We'll look up the law itself too. But 8 USC subsection 1225A1 establishes that any alien present in the United States who has not been admitted or who arrives in the United States, regardless of whether they arrive at a designated port of entry or not, is deemed an applicant for admission for the purpose of the Immigration and Nationality Act. This classification applies to individuals who have not been lawfully admitted or paroled into the U.S., including those who are intercepted in international or U.S. waters. This provision forms the legal basis for expedited removal proceedings, allowing immigration officers to inspect such individuals and determine admissibility without a hearing before an immigration judge, which has never been allowed in U.S. history. Legally. I'm not saying it's never been done. It has been done. And it's fine. I wouldn't care if we were doing this at a time when there wasn't just 10 million people let into the country illegally. But there was. So now's not the time for granting extra permissions, because they are permissions, not rights. All right. 8 U.S. Code 1225. Aliens treated as applicants for admission. An alien present in the United States who has not been admitted or who arrives in the United States, whether or not a designated port of arrival, and including an alien who is brought to the United States after having been interdicted in international or United States waters, shall be deemed for the purposes of this chapter an applicant for admission. No ambiguity there. An alien present in the United States who has not been admitted, i.e., not a citizen or legal resident, or who arrives in the United States, whether at a designated port or not, or intercepted in the ocean, whether it be international waters or U.S. waters, shall be deemed, for the purposes of this chapter, an applicant for admission. Subsection 2 is about stowaways, pretty irrelevant, but we'll read it anyway. An arriving alien who is a stowaway is not eligible to apply for admission or to be admitted and shall be ordered removed upon inspection by an immigration officer. Upon such inspection, if the alien indicates an intention to apply for asylum under Section 1158 of this title, or a fear of persecution, the officer shall refer the alien for an interview under subsection B1B. A stowaway may apply for asylum only if the stowaway is found to have credible fear of persecution under subsection B1B. In no case may a stowaway be considered an applicant for admission or eligible for a hearing under Section 1229A of this title. Let's see what it says under B1B real fast. B1B. An asylum officer shall conduct the interviews of aliens referred as we just read. If the officer determines at the time of the interview that the alien has a credible fear of prosecution within the meaning of the clause, the alien shall be detained for further consideration of application for asylum. Shall be detained for further consideration. That's not a court case. They didn't get a court case. An officer who deals with asylum will determine whether or not there is a credible risk. If there is, they can move on to the next step. In general, a lot of this comes from false asylum seeking, and that's why this is relevant. Subject to subclause 3, if the officer determines that the alien does not have a credible fear of prosecution, the officer shall order the alien removed from the United States without further hearing or review. All right. That was all I wanted. Number 3, inspection. All aliens, including alien crewmen, who are applicants for admission or otherwise seeking admission or readmission or to transit through the United States, shall be inspected by immigration officers. An alien applying for admission may, in the discretion of the Attorney General, and at any time, be permitted to withdraw the application for admission and depart immediately from the U.S. An applicant for admission may be required to state under oath any information sought by an immigration officer regarding the purposes and intentions of the applicant seeking admission to the United States, including the applicant's intended length of stay and whether the applicant intends to remain permanently or become a United States citizen and whether the applicant is inadmissible. Inspection of applicants for admission. Screening. In general, if an immigration officer determines that an alien or other than an alien described in subparagraph F who is arriving in the United States or is described in clause 3 is inadmissible under subsection 11828A6C or 11828A7 of this title, the officer shall order the alien removed from the United States without further hearing or review unless the alien indicates either an intention to apply for asylum or a fear of persecution. Without further hearing or review. We already read the claims for asylum interviews. Oh, actually, the claims for asylum. Hold on. The Attorney General may apply clauses 1 and 2 of this subparagraph to any or all aliens described in subclause 2 as designated by the AG. Such designate. Okay. An alien described in this clause, an alien not described. No. If an immigration officer determines that an alien is inadmissible under these two subsections. No, we already read this. Okay. Yeah, okay. It's just repeating. For the purposes of this subparagraph, the term credible fear of persecution means that there is a significant possibility, taking into account the credibility of the statements made by the alien in support of the alien's claim and such other facts as are known to the officer, that the alien could establish eligibility for asylum under Section 1158 of this title. Let's see. Except as provided A removal order entered in accordance with the subparagraph is not subject to administrative appeal, except that the Attorney General shall provide by regulation for prompt review of such an order under other subparagraph against an alien who claims under oath or is permitted under penalty of perjury after having been warned of the penalties for falsely making such a claim, have been lawfully admitted for permanent residence, to have been admitted as a refugee under subsection 1157, or to have granted asylum. Inspection of other aliens. A. 2A. Subject to paragraphs B and C, in the case of an alien who is an applicant seeking admission, an applicant for admission, hold on. In the case of an alien who is an applicant for admission, if the examining immigration officer determines that an alien seeking admission is not clearly and beyond a doubt entitled to be admitted, clearly and beyond a doubt entitled to be admitted, the alien shall be detained for a proceeding under section 1229 of this title. Nothing in there says anything about bail. Where's B and C? We already read B. C says, except as provided, a removal order entered in accordance is not subject to an administrative appeal. I just read that as well. Okay. The Attorney General of a state or other authorized state officer alleging a violation of detention and removal requirements that harm such state or its residents shall have standing to bring action against the Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of such state or the residents of the state in an appropriate district court in the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this paragraph to be the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this paragraph, a state or its residents shall be considered if they have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm, in excess of $100. The decision of the examining immigration officer, if favorable to the admission of an alien, shall be subject to challenge by any other immigration officer, and such challenge shall operate to take the alien whose privilege to be admitted is so challenged before an immigration judge for proceeding. I have yet to see anything in here about extended detention or bail or anything like that. It just says they're detained. That's it. For as long as it takes for them to have a hearing, which was well understood. All right. Reading law is not the most fun thing in the world, so I'm going to leave off doing that. But 8 U.S.C. 1225A1 defines an applicant for admission to the United States as an alien present in the United States who has not been admitted or who arrives in the United States. Section 1225B2A provides that in the case of an alien who is an applicant for admission, if the examining immigration officer determines that the alien seeking admission is not clearly and beyond a doubt entitled to be admitted, the alien shall be detained for proceeding under subsection 1229 of this title. The government detained petitioners on the grounds that because they are present in the United States and not admitted, they are applicants for admission, and therefore subject to mandatory detention under 1225B2A. Seems very straightforward to me. Unlike 8 U.S.C. 122BA, which petitioners argue applies to them and which the government until recently invoked to detain inadmissible non-citizens already present in the United States, makes no provision for release on bond. Thus, the government asserts the authority to detain them without bond pending removal proceedings. The district court in both cases consolidated here held that 1226A, not 1225B2A, applied to petitioners. But it just said the petitioners said that the other one applied to them. The district court reasoned that, as almost every district court to consider the issue has concluded, again, irrelevant how many other district courts have reached the same decision. The statutory text, the statute's history, congressional intent, and 1226A's application to non-citizens already present in the United States for the past 3 decades support finding that 1226 applies to these circumstances. Still irrelevant if the statute says they should be detained. Doesn't matter how it's been interpreted if it was incorrectly interpreted. If you need it fixed, we go to Congress to do that, not a judge. In one of the cases, the district court concluded the same and paused to highlight 2 particularly strong statutory interpretation arguments that undercut the government's interpretation, namely that subsection 1225B2A uses seeking admission alongside in addition to applicant for admission, and a variation in terms suggests a variation in meaning, and that reading 1226 to not apply to inadmissible non-citizens renders several portions of 1226 I hate this word. Superfluous. Superfluous. There we go. Including the recently passed Lake and Riley Act, because non-citizens subject to mandatory detention under 1226C1 would already have been subject to mandatory detention under B2A. The core issue with the phrase "an alien seeking admission" in 1225B2A limits the sweep of persons subject to mandatory detention under the statute, or whether it merely reinstates the category of applicant for admission. You see how far they're having to bend over backwards here to make the point, whereas the decision of the court was very straightforward and very clear. The text says this applies. This is not a credible reading for several reasons. Okay, the core issue is whether the phrase "an alien seeking admission" in 1225B2A limits the sweep of persons subject to mandatory detention under the statute, or whether it merely restates the category of applicant for admission, defined by 1225A1, and reproduced in 1225B2A, first phrase. Governments argue that there is no meaningful difference between an applicant for admission and an alien seeking admission because the latter category is broader than and includes the former. Because petitioners are applicants for admission as defined by 1225A1, therefore, they are necessarily also subject to 1225B2A. This is not a credible reading for several reasons. Instead, consistent with the statutory definition of admission, the provision's context, the Supreme Court's understanding of the statutory scheme, and the whole history of American immigration law, seeking admission means what it sounds like, actively seeking to enter this country. Because I would reject the government's invitation to rubber stamp this proposed legislation by executive fiat, I dissent. You already said that, dumbass. All right, so you can take that as you will. If you read those 2 phrases differently, seeking admission, what is it? Seeking admission and an alien seeking admission, or an applicant for admission. If you read those as different and think they apply to 2 different people, or don't both apply to an illegal alien that was arrested and then filed to stay in the United States, i.e. seek admission, then I guess be mad about it, but whatever. All right, I don't even want to get into this lady tonight. We'll do that tomorrow. I'm not sure I'm going to get into anything else, to be honest. I've completely lost my voice, and Alan said he was showing up, but then he didn't, so Let's see, what else do we... I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. I'm definitely not getting into that one either. A mob of anti-ICE activists plan to march on Portland mayor's home. If this doesn't tell you how ridiculous these people are, anti-ICE activists, radical leftists are going to march on the Portland mayor's home. The mayor of Portland, the most radical city in the country, and they're not happy with how radical he is. What does that tell you? Let's see. The idea is to pressure him to force ICE out of the sanctuary city. So the idea is to pressure him into going to war, literal war, because that is the only way you can force ICE out with the federal government. How do you feel about that? Does that not feel a little anti-American to you? Seems that way to me. But hey, that's just me, right? All right. Talk about that one tomorrow. That one's a pretty good story, or a pretty good article, I mean, but oh, let's see. How many people are hanging out with me anyway? Not many. I appreciate you guys that are here. Please follow the show, especially on Rumble and X, because they are the only ones that do not censor us and constantly take down our stream. We would greatly appreciate it. And don't forget to check out at First Allen 2, the American Sincerest, and my other co-host, Austin from the Miller Talk podcast, Miller Talk _pod on X. Anyway, there's new details on Jeffrey Epstein's suicide that we need to discuss, that we haven't discussed yet. And not like everyone there's new details on the case, but really it's just old details that we all learned about a long time ago. No, these are new details. At least they were to me. That entirely contradict everything, and I was right. Dan Bongino is full of shit. And I think has burned all of his credibility. I mean, unless for some reason he claims that this was hidden from him, both him and Kash Patel are liars. And I tell you what, this is starting to look like the first Trump administration, where Trump had a bunch of snakes around him, and suddenly they start appearing again. Do we want to get into that tonight, or do we want to wait? I think I'm going to wait because, like I said, I'm losing my voice more and more the longer I go here. So, yeah, you can send me an email directly, JBU@USA.com. Matter of fact, I was going to check those real fast. See if anybody has cussed me out lately. Been a couple days. Miller Talk did. No, I don't see anything new yet. Perfect. So if you want to send me an email directly about anything I said tonight, go ahead. JBU@USA.com. You can find the show on X, JBU_show, on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, JBU.Show. Just search JBU.Show. Or you can find us on audio podcast as well. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that audio podcasts are available. Anchor.fm/JBU. And yep, since I don't have anybody with me, that's it for tonight, guys. I appreciate you being here, and we'll be back tomorrow with the show. Hopefully my co-host will actually be joining me tomorrow night. With that, my name is Chris, and this has been Just Between Us. There it is. I was going to say, why is the music not playing? Thanks for watching, guys.